I grew up in the Novus Ordo Mass, but feel drawn to the traditional rite. As a younger Catholic, is it wrong to feel disillusioned with the new form?
Well, thank you, Colin, for your question. And I think a good place to start with this answer is to go back to Pope Benedict XVI's Summorum Pontificum. And when he issued it, he said that those who were seeking the use of the older books, the pre-Vatican II books, they had to meet two criteria. The first is that they had to hold that the Mass of Paul VI, the Mass after Vatican II, is valid. So it is a actual sacrament and sacrifice. The Eucharist is actually confected and all that sort of good stuff that goes along with that. And the other one is that they have to hold it's legitimate. Now, this legitimate phrase is a bit ambiguous. So there's actually a question submitted to the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, which was then the sort of arm in the Vatican that was responsible for implementing and interpreting Summorum Pontificum and all the associated documents that go along with it. They were in charge of the different sort of religious communities that were dedicated to the traditional Mass and sort of trying to resolve problems on the ground where problems arose in the implementation of Summorum Pontificum. And the question was submitted, like, basically, what does legitimate mean? Does it mean that we just have to hold that the new Mass was legitimately promulgated, or do we have to hold that as a liturgy that it is basically equivalent with the older Mass, that liturgically they're the same? So, but here we need to make a distinction with something that's lost in the conversation, the distinction between a sacrament being a valid sacrament and the liturgy surrounding the sacrament. Because a lot of times you can get into the argument, well, Jesus is present at both, so like, what's the big deal? And that's a very reductionist and minimalist view of the Mass. And what the question is asking is not, is it the same sacrifice? The answer is yes, the same sacrifice between the new Mass, the old Mass, the Byzantine Mass, the Coptic Mass, divine liturgies, Syriac. They're all the same sacrifice, but they are different liturgies. And so the question was asking, like, viewing it from the point of view of liturgy, do we have to accept that the old Mass and the new Mass are on par with each other? Or do we just have to accept the new Mass was legitimately promulgated? And the Ecclesia Dei Commission came back and said, you just have to accept it's been legitimately promulgated. So those are kind of like two of the bounds we have to play within. The other two that come out of that is that it follows that the celebration of the new Mass per se is not sinful, and it can sanctify those who attend it. So as long as you kind of hold those 4 points, one, that the new Mass is valid, it's not per se sinful, it can sanctify, and it was legitimately promulgated, you then have areas to play in on sort of how you feel about it. Again, with Ecclesia Dei saying that for the time being, it's not making rulings sort of as the comparison of the liturgies, the liturgical aspects of the two books. And so if you want to have legitimate discussions about deficiencies or disillusionments or superiorities on either side, you can have them as long as you sort of kind of hold to those 4 points. And those are legitimate discussions that can be had. And again, I think it's not helpful to just kind of shut it down and say, well, Jesus is present in both, so therefore we don't really talk about it. Because in a certain sense, we're going to talk about just validity. Like, we'd never do this with any other sacrament, right? You wouldn't like go to somebody and be like, how's your marriage going? They'd be like, well, it's valid. They're like that's not super helpful information about how the marriage is going, right? So like, why do we do this with the Mass, with the ceremonies that should be surrounding, this great sacrifice being offered up by the Church through the headship of the Son to the Father? And so it is appropriate, again, if we're kind of within those bounds established by the Ecclesia Dei Commission, to have these discussions. And so I think you're free to have those discussions. You're free to have different evaluations as long as we're, again, sort of staying within those 4 principles and approaching it in an atmosphere of charity. So I think that would be my answer to that.